All right, call today's meeting to order. It's the April 24th, 2025 quarterly meeting of the Climate Action and Resilience Committee. My name is Brian Mays. I'm the City Councilor for St. Vital Ward. I'll be chairing today's meeting. Start with a land and water acknowledgement. I'd like to acknowledge that we are in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Innu, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. We're all good on the technical end?
Yes, just a display.
Okay. So we've got a good long agenda here today and joined by the members of the committee, including Matt Driver, who's I think here for a second meeting, the Deputy Chief Administrative Officer. And we've had one changeover in membership, I think since our last meeting. So we thank Darcy Granow for the work she put in. And luckily, we're retaining her with the City of Winnipeg. And the next meeting, Lindsay Villeneuve will be joining us either in person or by Zoom. So we're pleased to have her join the committee. Madam Clerk, do we need anything that we can? All right, we need to approve minutes from the last meeting. Okay. Thanks. So moved by Casey. All those in favor? Contrary, that's carried. Thank you for that. We do have one presenter here for number 5, but I don't think the other items should take too long. So excited to hear about the results of the first opinion poll that got done. So got some good media coverage on that as well, I would say. So Madam Clerk, any delegations? No? Okay. So the verbal report, I had planned to talk a fair bit about the new building emissions reduction strategy, which is not to be confused with the Climate Action Plan or the Energy Roadmap, but is now a third iteration. But on the good news side, the EPC, the Executive Committee, voted on April 22nd to have comments from this committee at its June meeting. How the whole system is supposed to work. This is why we have this committee, is to get some commentary on these items that have major environmental impacts. So that, as Laura reminded me, still has to get through council. Thank you for that. So presumably at our next meeting, we'll have had the chance, everyone will have had the chance to review this new energy reduction strategy, which is roughly a $38 million strategy divided somewhat between capital and operating. A step forward. I think Laura was in the media a bit, as was I, commenting a bit on this. Step forward. How big a step forward? What else could we do? It's obviously not as big a number as we might want to see, as was kicked around a few years ago when we were talking about 50 million or 80 million. But it's certainly something. It is not yet in the budget, though. That's worth saying. So, serious report prepared by the city administration. So that'll be probably the main thing we can talk about in June. I don't think really that there was much else I wanted to highlight from council's viewpoint. So look forward to having that. That actually is a sign people are starting to pay attention to this committee and want to get some feedback from it. So look forward to having that debate. So that's my report. I don't think we need to have any. All right. So Mr. Dryborough here moves to receive that as information. All those in favor? That's carried. And now a report from the Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just provide a very brief update on the activities of the Climate Steering Committee, which for folks' background here is ostensibly the connection between this committee, CARC, and senior management within the public service. This steering committee meets quarterly. Our most recent meeting was, in fact, yesterday. The responsibilities of this committee include steering climate action initiatives across various city departments, guiding the update to the Winnipeg Climate Action Plan and promoting climate action, climate lens, the various policies and projects across city departments. With respect to the climate action plan update, the steering committee has been reviewing and they finalized the scope and project approach for that exercise. We have released an RFP for consulting services for that exercise and having closed yesterday. So the project team is now working to select a component to do this work. And so very briefly, this exercise will kind of review progress made on the plan to date, as well as solicit some community and stakeholder feedback, new actions within the plan forward. And the project team is also sort of coordinating this review with some other complementary policies within the city, like the Green Space Action, or the Green Space Plan, and the biodiversity. As far as action teams, the steering committee, the climate steering committee's reviewed updates from action teams. These are teams that are put together consisting of members of the public service to address certain climate issues that are identified by this committee as well as the steering committee. One of these action teams is the Energy Planning Action Team. They've been working closely with Manitoba Hydro and Efficiency Manitoba, more or less sort of information sharing, as well as working to identify some potential coordination on future energy planning initiatives. Another action team is the Environmental Benefits Action Team. This is a team that's been tasked to review potential opportunities in federal regulations with the fuel standards and to identify potential funding opportunities for projects that the city could participate in with some of those standards. Another item I just want to touch on briefly in terms of capacity building. Certain city staff are participating in a program called the Economic Tools to Advance Climate Adaptation. This is a program that provides training to staff on ways to incorporate climate change financial risk into investment planning and asset management, as well as guidance on the development of climate risk and financial disclosure guidelines for Canadian cities, which are going to become more germane in the future. Lastly, I just wanted to report that the Office of Sustainability, or Becky's group, are in the process of applying for funding from the Canadian Federation of Canadian Municipalities for a grant that'll look at ways to study how the city can better support low carbon energy or community energy systems like district geothermal and solar energy, which I think is topical given the provincial interest in geothermal in particular. So we're excited about this, excited about the opportunities here, and we're excited to also work in partnership with other sort of stakeholder organizations.
Any questions? Actually, this brings to mind two things I meant to mention. One, certainly when we get to the debate about the building energy reduction strategy, one of the points I want to raise is, well, it never came to our meeting, but when council voted to proceed with both the Kenniston Road widening project and the $900 million for the new Chief Peguis Trail, there was a benefit, a numerical benefit, dollar benefit associated with reducing carbon emissions, $250 a ton, which is about the right number according to various studies I've seen. So I will be arguing that if we can bring that in to justify other projects, we should probably be bringing that same analysis to some of these environmental projects like building emissions reduction strategy. We should come up with whatever number, how many tons are being saved of carbon and put a value to that. And then, sorry, Matt, what was your final point there? Reminded me of.
So we're applying for funding to look at ways that for the city to support what we're calling low carbon community energy systems, so district geo.
So as people may remember, we put forward a motion out of this committee that was shot down by the city's Water and Waste Committee about looking at putting into action what we'd said in the energy roadmap about trying to get off natural gas. The one strand of that made it up through council was let's ask the province how they're doing on the geothermal utility. And we've had an interesting sequence of two different letters. The first letter from the deputy minister, after 2.5 months, one sentence, 3 sentences. Thank you for your letter is the first sentence, and the final sentence is thank you again for your letter. So the only one sentence in the middle, we're not doing anything on a utility. Within about 2 weeks, that was seriously reworked by the Minister of the Environment, I suspect, not being pleased with that. So to his credit, so we did get another letter saying, no, we are, we're doing things on geothermal. We haven't decided how we're going to deliver this. We still want to do the 5,000 homes we promised in the 2023 election. So good. So a little more productive exchange with the province then. So how we can tie into that, I don't know yet, but maybe some of the discussion that's coming up later will help with that. So, all right. So thank you, Matt. So someone can move to accept that report as information. So moved by Don. Okay, all those in favor? Thank you. And report from the committee coordinator.
Thank you. I'd just like to highlight a few items from the written report. CARC has been quite active, holding 3 working meetings to plan for work plan activities and budget for the year ahead. CARC members have developed guidelines to initiate subcommittees and working groups that can include public service and community subject matter experts. CARC plans to initiate a zero emissions buildings working group as recommended in the Community Energy Investment Roadmap. CARC has been working closely with the consultants on the 2 active projects that we have to keep informed and to provide input at various points. I'm pleased to share that the Prairie Climate Center was hired to work on CARC's motion, researching methods to align actions with climate targets. And thank you to Probe Research for completing the Winnipeg Climate Action poll in March. And Mary Agnes will be here presenting those key findings shortly. So we're looking forward to that. And the data from that poll will be available on the Open Data portal in the near future. The results from the poll are just one piece of the data puzzle to inform CARC's work going forward. And the questions and results highlight the level of concern about climate change and its impact on city services, familiarity and level of satisfaction with what the city is doing on climate change, and priority actions among city services, as well as experiences that residents have with the impacts of climate change. So there's a lot of interesting information there that we'll dig into further. CARC has also prioritized community relationship building and sharing information with other ad hoc committees of council and environmental organizations working on renewable energy. Earlier this week, CARC members and Councillor Mays attended Earth Day celebrations. And the theme of that event was renewable energy. So thank you to the Coalition of Community Groups, students, and those who attended for sharing their experiences, the intergenerational impacts of climate change, and solutions for the future. The next scheduled CARC meeting is September 17th, unless we have a special meeting to address future referrals that might come. Thank you.
Good point. Thank you. Thank you for that. And on the topic of renewable energy, I'm going to continue to ask the mayor's office about progress on the renewed natural gas, RNG with, what is it, IGRS, the renewed natural gas project with the company that does the flaring at the Brady landfill. Negotiations now taking as long as the international law, the Sea Treaty, I think, but it's the year 3 and still hoping to see that before the end of this term of office. But if anything comes of that, update you, or maybe in September we can, if there's still no report, maybe we can talk about that, because that has been there's been a series of reports since at least 2022 on trying to do something with rather than just flaring the methane at Brady. Any questions for Laura as coordinator? If not, then, other Laura Tyler, could you please move, easier to remember? Yes, it was work around the table. Have you moved the, accepting that report as information? All right, thank you. All those in favor? Thank you. Operating budget, 2025 Kirk operating budget. There is no capital budget.
All right, so every year we present a budget for council's consideration. This year we have a $47,000 budget that we're requesting, and it is, we're proposing it is allocated into 3 budget lines: meetings, education and training, and consulting services. This is a little bit different than last year, just because we have a year under our belts with the committee and better understand what kind of needs we have and activities that we would like to do. So these budget lines align with the work plan, and it creates some flexibility for us to see how the year unfolds as well for activities not yet defined. So
And this would have been generated through the subcommittee, through the work groups.
yes, the CARC members have been included in those discussions for sure.
Okay. In light of that, then I would assume everyone's had a chance to take a look at this and it's okay. So, there's no discussion. I should add, and Laura had asked me about this, there is a separate council. It's not a salary, it's not a stipend, it's councilors who chair committees get a couple of $1,000s for expenses for, but that's calculated separately, that's for city clerks, so that's not coming out of this budget. Okay, Joseph, can you move that one then, to receive that as information? All right, so move. Is it? Oh, thank you. So not moving to receive it as information, thank you, Leah, for that. All right, so all those in favor of the recommendation? Aye, thank you, that's carried. And then we're on to report on public opinion research on climate action, on climate change and action. So Laura, do you want to speak to that? Or
I think it would be great if Mary Agnes could
Yes.
jump in and give us
Jump
the
in.
highlights, please.
This is okay, I'll sit, yeah, sit
yeah,
here,
yeah.
and then. I don't wanna,
Yeah.
you bring it up where you need to,
Sure, absolutely.
yeah. Okay, thanks everyone. I'm glad to be able to talk about this, and I'll give you some thoughts on my interpretation of the data, but I'm always most curious about your views on it. What pings for you, what feels right, what feels a little weird. So please jump in as I go, if that's okay. I'll maybe pause and ask for questions. Is that all right? Councilor Mays? Okay, great. All right, good. Just a quick recap of the Metho. I got the impression from Laura that you folks were Metho nerds, so I'll just tell you how we actually did this. This is part of our quarterly omnibus, so it's a survey of 1,000 Manitobans, 600 Winnipeggers. We were in field March 4th to 16th, and we gather the data from a whole bunch of different methodologies in order to capture the biggest breadth of Winnipeggers that we can. So one way is live agent interviews. Hello, we're calling from Probe Research. Would you do a survey if we emailed it to you? And then there's IVR, so interactive voice response. Push 1 if you want to take a survey from the Free Press or from Probe Research, as well as our online panel. We use panel sample from our own panel, mostly for to make sure we got enough young people. And so there is an element of randomness to the poll, which allows us to have a margin of error, 4.0 percentage points, 19 times out of 20. So for Probe, this is our kind of platinum standard survey. Yeah, any questions about the Metho just before I go on?
Oh, that's great.
Okay, great. Okay, we can come back to that if you need to. Okay, some good news and bad news about this first question. So the first question, just to get a clean read on where people were at, how concerned are you, if at all, about climate change? 77% of Winnipeggers are concerned. It's maybe 45% very concerned is maybe that's what we tell ourselves a little bit, maybe. And so I always look at some of the data about climate change, and you'll see this in a couple of the upcoming slides, as sort of a mile wide but an inch deep. People aren't always entirely sort of honest about how concerned they really are about climate change in terms of priority. But still a reasonably good place to start. 77% very concerned. A third not concerned. And the number that I actually look at here is that 12% not concerned at all. In a whole bunch of surveys we've asked a variation of this question multiple times. That 12 to 15% are typically the climate change skeptics / maybe more right-leaning folks who will just really never quite buy into the science or some of the messaging around climate change. It's funny how often it falls to 12% in a whole bunch of different surveys that we do.
33 should be 23, right?
Where? 32?
Or the 77 should be 67. like I said.
Have we done the math wrong?
Oh, it is.
This should be, this is 33.
No, 23.
23, yes, you're right.
The
Yes.
not concerned is 23, not, yeah.
Yes, you're right.
Right.
Oh, yes, okay. This is right in the actual
Yeah.
report. Thanks for pointing that out. Yeah,
No,
when
it's
we
good.
designed this, I didn't double check that. So thank you for that. So right, but the 77% is, yes, right. Okay, good. All right.
It's also how we budget the city, by the way.
Okay, good.
110%.
No, that's the effort that we get in.
Yeah.
Okay.
And those who tend to be very concerned, who are sort of already in your orbit, again, tend to be women, inner city folks, LGBTQ folks, who tend to be a bit more left leaning, and those from lower income households. And lower income households figure kind of as a bit of a through line through this research. So then we asked kind of a variation on that same question. Okay, you've told us that you think it's kind of a high priority-ish. Compared to all of the other things that the city of Winnipeg is facing, where does climate change rank? And I think this one gives us maybe a clearer sense of where people really are on this issue. So now I'm quickly doing the math on these to make sure we got the presentation version of this right. 29% say a big priority, not the biggest. 28% a medium priority. People tend to be kind of in the mushy middle on this question. Even though in the first question people said it's a pretty big priority. I'm very concerned when they're actually asked to weigh that against other city issues. It tends to fall down the scale a little bit. Once again, that 12% not a priority at all, and that. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And then folks in that mushy middle. Again, those women, inner city folks, lower income folks, again tend to be in your orbit. So then we tried to dig down a little bit on how the city's doing when it comes to climate change. This was maybe a little bit of what I call a puppies are cute question. The city of Winnipeg should be doing a lot more to stop pollution. I initially thought that was a little bit of a motherhood question, but I was maybe a little bit surprised to see how soft the agreement was there. 46% somewhat agree. I would have thought most Winnipeggers would say, yeah, strongly, we should all be doing more to stop pollution. But the agreement level there is just a little bit tepid, I would say. Same with that next bar there. Climate change should be part of every decision city councillors make. Is climate change embedded in the decision-making process at City Hall? Sure, a little bit. Not quite sure what that means, maybe. One half say somewhat agree with that. Again, maybe a little bit soft. And then the big undecided, big unsure on that last bar. The City of Winnipeg's actions to address climate change are making a positive impact. One half just don't know. They don't have any real sense what the city's doing on climate change. I think even the folks who, who agree might have some questions about, wait, I think I have some faith that they're working on it, but not 100% sure. Even that agree is pretty tepid. But fundamentally, people just don't have a sense of what the city's doing. And this graph kind of bears that out. 81% unfamiliar with what the city is doing to prepare for and respond to climate change. The funny thing is here, it's men who say they're more familiar, younger people a little more familiar, which is not a bad thing. Men always tend to maybe overestimate their knowledge. Women tend to be much more I don't want to say, they tend to be a lot less confident in their knowledge. But even so, men think they know what's going on, so that's good to know. But it's still a really small proportion of Winnipeggers who are familiar with the city's plans for climate change. I'll show one more and then I'll just maybe pause. And again, this bears it out, and this tends to be both of these familiarity and satisfaction questions, I think, are benchmarks. These are places to grow from. It's a start to kind of move forward. People can't even tell us if they're satisfied or dissatisfied because they just don't know they don't know what the city's approach to climate change is. And everyone else is kind of on the other end of those spectrums. But still, the story here is that people just don't have an opinion on how the city's doing on this issue. I'll pause there. We have a couple of other slides to show. Any questions about that so far? Anything surprising?
For me, surprising that the low income getting aware and concerned and kind of almost a priority, no? Because what you find normally is that the priority are other aspects of your life, unless that they understand that this is connected to their main issues, and that is the interesting thing
Yes,
for me.
and there's a little bar graph that maybe bears that out coming up. Typically, in most of the surveys we do, climate change is a bigger issue for wealthier, better educated folks. And they tend to be much more progressive on some of those issues. Yeah, please.
I was just saying, I was surprised for the first two questions that there was no age gradient or significant difference between the age groups.
Yep. No, and that surprised me a little bit as well. I think we have this impression that young people are more worried about climate change than older folks. In the last 2-3 years, kind of post-COVID, young people are getting more and more conservative, especially young men. And I think that's also that there's maybe a bit of a shift in that, in some of those perceptions.
So building off one of your earlier comments about this being more of an issue for people at the higher income level, it's also true that climate change tends to take on a larger importance when people are more confident about the economy and confident about sort of the direction of the economy and whatnot, right? I mean, that's probably an issue of the answer tariffs and
Yep. Yep, and I think that plays specifically into that priority question. If we'd asked that question maybe last fall, it might have been it might have risen up the priority list a little bit. Having said that, in almost a good example is almost really every survey we do, we ask people an open-ended question: what is your biggest worry in your community? Climate change environment is 2%, 4%. It's always really far at the bottom of that list. Healthcare, crime, now tariffs, cost of living, those are all at the top of the list.
Do you think that for the views on the City of Winnipeg's climate change responsibilities, do you think that there's possibly just a perception that we're not polluting as much in the city, or that we've decrease the amount that we pollute, or do you think it's just that they don't believe we should be?
Yeah, I think one question there, and we toyed with this wording quite a bit, is what counts as pollution? We have asked a few climate change questions, and so that will be on the minds of respondents when they're answering that. But they might also be thinking about, you know, like Winnipeg, nutrients, garbage, composting, curbside composting, all of those other pollution sort of adjacent issues. As a bit of a temperature check, which I think that is what this question was meant to be. Are we doing enough? Are we not doing enough? I think, I come back to that sense that people just don't know what the city's really doing. And they think, sure, more would be better in a kind of a soft way. Other questions? Yeah, keep going. This is where that low income number comes in a little bit here. So I'll just kind of go from top to bottom. People feel kind of prepared. I think I'm a little bit prepared for extreme weather. I've done a few things, but certainly a lot more room to move that number. And maybe that is a very practical number to be able to nudge, to ensure people are ready for those extreme weather events and that they feel ready for them, because they do a little, but not nearly as confident as they might be. I was skeptical of this second question, but I actually have come to quite like it. The people and places I love are at risk because of climate change. I would have thought people would have had a hard time kind of personalizing climate change, but 1/2 agreed, and reasonably strongly, that the places that they care about are at risk. Once again, we kind of have those folks that don't agree with that or don't see the urgency and the personal urgency to this. But that's a question I would really be fascinated to see if there's change over time on that question. Again, 1/2 said that their physical or mental health has been impacted by climate change. I think air quality wildfires is I wonder if we hadn't included that example, which I think is useful to respondents, but that I think maybe nudged that number up a little bit with that example, but still reasonably conscious of those impacts on us, 1/2. And then we get back to that, and I'm also glad we asked this one. Climate change is nowhere close to the crisis some say it is. We've got those, 12, 15, 18% who strongly agree, another 12% who are kind of in that, not maybe climate skeptic. I think the weather is a natural occurrence kind of folks, but then pretty strong disagree, and 40% disagree with that statement strongly, which I think is also kind of trending in the right direction. And then that low income question. I can't afford to heat or cool my home to a comfortable temperature during extreme weather. Those low income earners are, I think it's twice as likely as high income earners to say that they're worried about those costs, which I think again is maybe part of that. Winnipeggers starting to see some of the personal impacts of climate change, even in a place that I think we tell ourselves is maybe going to be less impacted than other parts of North America. Any questions about those? There's a lot of data on that slide. Any question about those? Prizes? Right. Oh, wait. Okay. This question was, and Laura and I were chatting about this a little bit. When I look at this graph, and this is a question about how concerned are you about climate change affecting this big list of things, for me, the upshot of this chart is we're worried about all the things. Kinda, sorta. Roads, 75% concerned, and then right down to Winnipeg's drinking water, roughly in the same neighborhood. We're roughly concerned to the same degree about all those things. A bit less concerned, but still in the ballpark, is the effect of climate change on community centers, libraries, places where people go to get some relief from extreme weather. But still reasonably 60% are concerned about the impact on that. Maybe hadn't given that one as much thought, but still concerned. I might have asked, as we're thinking about this in the future, we might have asked for a bit of a priority list. In the next slide, I'll show you how the forcing people to pick priorities sometimes works a little better. But there is sort of reasonable kind of latent worry about climate change, its effect on all of these parts of city services and infrastructure. And then kind of the differences by city region. I think this is, let me just see here. This is, I think, general concern. Yeah, about, so inner city folks, I might just another look at that. Inner city folks tend to be much more concerned about all of those things. And so now it's the priority. What should we do about some of these things? When it comes to climate change, which actions from this big list should we prioritize? Transit is the big one. Green spaces, a pretty solid number 2. And then kind of a series of things that are reasonably close to each other. The ones that are pretty low on the list are protecting trees on private property, and EV charging stations. I was actually surprised that EV charging stations was so low. That is not a priority for folks. But this, I think, even though you do want to look at climate change as a holistic thing with a great many different solutions that all work together, Winnipeggers have chosen what they feel is important fairly clearly. Public transit and green spaces, fairly clearly there. Any questions about that? Yeah.
You offered these categories up to
Yes.
folks?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I know you didn't have, one of our biggest projects here, which is the upgrade to sewage treatment plant. There is some.
Yeah, we didn't. That's
But while environmental, it's not as much.
climate change. Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose.
Yeah. And I will also just point out the 10%, none of these, those are my kind of magic 12 to 15% folks who say, don't want to do any of this stuff. It's all, all hippie stuff. Any questions about those priorities?
So the blue is how many people rank the top priority? The number on the right is if it's in the top 3.
Yeah, so the number on the right is the 47% on the top there is the percentage of times it was ranked in the top 3. And then we've also included the number 1 priority. Those usually sort of match generally. There's just sort of different ways of showing that data.
I found my increasing view is it will be very difficult to convince people to move off natural gas, and that's somewhat reflected there. I'm surprised by the tree, how high preserved green spaces go. Preserve them on
But not
private
mine,
property.
yeah.
Maybe, but not a big priority. So that runs, and that's very much a live debate here, and we should be doing a tree bylaw. Should we be doing it during the current hellish debate on the federal housing accelerator stuff, or should that wait for 3 or 4 more years, and all sorts of tension on that. But that number, anything you can glean from those two things, the energy renewable and the trees on private property?
Yeah, a few things. I think there is a default among the public to always just want more green space and favor green space, without always being clear on who manages and where it should be. And we when we do work for the Forks, for example, what do you want more of at the Forks? More green space, except the green space is actually underused in some cases. And so I think there's kind of a, we want parks, that's what we want. So I think that's one reason that it tends to percolate to the top. I think the phrase private, there's no other way to phrase it. It's gonna be in private property. I think that might dissuade, that instantly makes, okay, what does that really mean? Does that mean there's gonna be a tree inspector come? Okay, no, I don't want that.
I can't
like-
cut down.
Yeah,
like the-
I can't,
the
yes, I can't.
Cedar that's dying.
Exactly, yeah, or there'll be, and I think even for people that would, it raises some questions, I think, for people that are answering this survey in line at the superstore. That's where we want people to do surveys, that's who we want to capture, but we're conscious of, people are making really quick, snap decisions when they're answering questions like this. So I think that was part of that millisecond of thought, wait, what is this? Okay, what does this mean? And then when it comes to transitioning neighborhoods to renewable energy, I think sometimes, and I feel this way, what does that mean? Is that everybody goes on geothermal? I know natural gas isn't great, but how does it work? And is that the city's job? And that sounds too big. That sounds maybe too ambitious. Unless you are kind of an energy expert or, a magical hydro staffer or something like that. That would be trying to imagine what's going through folks' minds when they're answering that question. That'd be what I would think. Other questions? Maria.
I was just thinking with the preserve green space versus the protect the trees, like if I was forced to choose only 3,
Yeah.
I would pick the catch-all, all the important green spaces, components of it, rather than one specific part of it.
Yep.
Not sure if that has any impact. And then with the electrical vehicle charging locations, I was also curious because low income folks and equity groups prominently said they were concerned, like they might not be able to afford electric vehicles. So that could be why the infrastructure to support that is less so.
Yeah.
I really agree with that because quite frankly, it doesn't say preserve public green spaces. It just says green spaces. So that really could, if I had to choose, you're right. There's a lot of other things I want to add in. If I've got 3 choices, I pick the general one. Doesn't negate, I think, the efforts that are going into maybe a bylaw to preserve trees on public property.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. If the question was about the bylaw, it's a different question, no?
Yeah,
That would be an interesting question.
Yeah.
The specific wording.
Yeah. Anyway.
Do you think that there's a big education gap here in that what we're seeing as well?
In terms of the views of people with high school or less versus the views of, or is it the
Sorry,
need
you meant, like,
to educate the public?
Education on the topics, not
Yes.
more broadly.
Yeah, I think on the issues of what the city's doing and what it could do, that is where the huge education gap is. I don't know that more education about the impact of the climate crisis is going to ramp up the sense of urgency among the public. And you see that in polling that's done across Canada during wildfires, during floods. Those are the moments where people feel slightly more urgent and then it dissipates so quickly. We see that in even focus groups that we do. And so this survey reminds me of the question that I always have in all of the questions we ask about climate change, which is why doesn't it resonate? Why isn't it a deeper sense of crisis? People are, when I sort of look at that data, people are answering that. I know I'm supposed to be worried about climate change. I kind of am. I know I should be more worried about it, but I'm worried about 25 other things. And it's such a big problem. And now nobody's going to fix it. It's over. Carbon tax is dead. And, Trump. And so I think the messaging around climate change is, it just doesn't resonate with people in a sticky way, I think.
But I think there's some other things too. I answered a survey recently and it had choices and I chose economy over climate change.
Yeah,
Not because I don't think climate change is an existential issue, but if you don't do something about the economy, you're not gonna be able to address it. So, I mean, there's a lot of other little sort of things that go into people's decision making on a poll like this. I know that some of the things where you'd say, you know, do you think that the city's addressing things, but well, it may be if they say they're satisfied or something, they may actually think that things are going the right way. But if they're dissatisfied, I mean, there's a number of things that could be read slightly differently, I guess.
yep, that's true. And I think in that question, it's really that I just don't know. That's really for me, the real takeaway there. People just don't know. And I think one of the maybe perhaps unintentionally valuable things about this survey was that we asked that how important is this? How worried are you about this in a few different ways? And so you get a little bit of the nuance from, I know I'm supposed to say I'm very concerned. It's not really a top priority, but I am really worried about the places that I love. You know, one half are worried about that. So there's kind of a gray, mushy area there that is an opportunity area, I think, for folks who are concerned about climate change.
I'm intrigued by the transit number too, how high that is. A former former deputy CAO said here once, well, 20% of the people want to take the bus. The other 80% don't care at all, and the 20% care too much about transit. So
Yeah.
and there was some truth, and that the number hasn't really, you know, it's not like now 40% of the people commute by
Yeah.
transit. But that's a high. I mean, it's intriguing because it's 23. I mean, even if 47% of the people in this town do not regularly take the bus, I would venture to say, but that might be saying, well, if the bus was safer, or if the bus was a train, or if the bus, you know.
Or if other people took the bus, they would be
Yeah.
driving.
I think that's it.
Yeah.
I mean, this is an obvious category. This is an obvious civic category that can be
Yes.
invested in to
And
address climate change.
I think it's also the one that we instinctively know, okay, if we just get out of our cars, we'll do better on climate change. If we get more people taking the bus, we've been told that for 30 years. That one sticks. I know that's the one we should do. These other ones maybe aren't quite as cycling, walk paths, grants, okay, foodways, how does that? Transit, I get the impact that would have on climate change and emissions. Other last questions? I think that was my last slide. Yeah.
Lead composting got at least some votes.
I know.
considering we're actually tentatively moving forward on that.
Yes. But you know how much the pilot project folks loved the composting. We did some of that work as well, and man, those people that got in the pilot project, they loved it.
Which my colleagues would say, oh, the free pilot project? Yeah, they love that.
I pay for my
But-
compost and I love it, so.
Yeah. No, you'll be saving money actually, but
Well, to go with Laura Ripple's point that, you know, some people had to make decisions between them, I think you could start grouping a few of these. Like, if you look at the transitioning neighborhoods to renewable energy and having tougher efficiency rules for houses and buildings, like, did the same people, you know, in terms of the top three priorities, choose each of those, or are they either or sort of thing? And
That-
same thing with, of course, we talked about the trees on private property and green spaces, but if you began to put them together, you might see a slightly different picture of overall priorities, but then you'd have to be able to sort out between who answered what.
And there are about 1,200 ways of grouping those, and
Well, like-
yeah, and I was,
Plus, this is another.
Yeah.
Well, just on that note, like supporting active transportation, sort of in the improving public transit and build more cycling and walking paths.
Right.
Is collectively ranking quite high, which makes me think, you know, maybe we should have some more discussions about supporting active transportation and moving that forward.
And when I look at the Tucker Energy Efficiency Rules for new houses and buildings, then everybody who's like, I got mine, would be like, I'm not worried about that, like, I've already bought my house, or I never intend to buy a house, so.
That's true.
Like the new versus old stock, I think is quite a distinction.
I agree.
Matt, do we have any grants and programs to help people weatherproof their homes?
We provide those grants,
I don't-
off the top of my head, I
can't think of it.
don't think so. I mean, I think those are probably.
Efficiency
I
Manitoba.
was just gonna say, if
Yeah.
it's Manitoba,
Would be good.
Hydro/Efficiency Manitoba, province may offer something. for that. Off the top of my head. Right.
There was a flyer with my hydro bill where it said something about that.
Okay, any further questions? If not, thank you, Mary. So it's
You're
good
welcome.
us, I think the first one of these we've done, and so that's good, usable stuff. So
Yes.
Thank you for that.
And some good lessons learned, I think also. Yeah,
Okay.
about how we can maybe
And if
tweak
we
the
do it in
question.
1 year, we will see the difference.
It takes a while to move you move the numbers. That's a battle, yeah.
We
Thanks,
probably-
everyone.
There's, yeah, lots of thinking. Somebody asked me the other day how many acres I kept saying 2,000 acres, which was dead wrong. It was 1,000 acres we had said we'd add to city parkland, I think, some years ago. And it's more than zero, but less than one, I think we did. I know we added about a 6/10 of an acre in Allard and Greater Vancouver Park, but we probably should have some way of tracking that, or so people aren't, yeah, and so you don't, we reclassified this, half the schoolyard, we decided it was really a park, and therefore we've acquired a new park. No, like legit stuff. But anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you.
Well, again, I mean, great minds think alike, yeah, I'm not so sure we can count that.
Yeah, that was,
Depending on how council wants to define adding parks. I would agree with you.
money well spent, I think. Okay, and I think Laura, you're speaking to a motion then.
Yes. So in conversations with CARC, we think the opinion poll and results are a really important first step to better understand Winnipeggers' perspectives and satisfaction on climate change. And this information is useful on an ongoing and in-depth basis to inform the work of the Public Service Council and the Climate Action and Resilience Committee activities. And CARC recently learned that the city's annual citizen satisfaction survey will include a new question to assess the level of satisfaction on, I quote, the city efforts to address climate change. And this is a very positive step, but more can be done to promote communication and involvement between the city and community. And so that is why CARC is recommending that, one, the Public Service review the public opinion research on Winnipeg climate action, survey questions and results to inform departmental analysis of citizen needs and satisfaction on climate change action. And two, departments integrate climate change questions when they conduct in-depth citizen polls on a specific topic or service.
Thank you for that. Any discussion on that motion? I would say that while our last motion that went up to Water and Waste did not do well, I am now the longest serving person on that committee, and I got on in December or November, so the entire membership has changed since that vote, so hope springs eternal, room for optimism, so, okay, any further, thank you for the work on the motion. So we need, right, can Laura move that thing? Yeah. Okay. Alright. Okay, call the question then, all those in favor? Alright, that passes, thank you. And that would go up, Madam Clerk, to the Water and Waste Committee meeting that is fairly soon.
The next meeting of Water and Waste is on May 5th.
Yes, all right. Okay, final item here is researching methods. This was the extension of time one, and a further extension of time is required.
Yes. Yeah, the research is in progress with the Prairie Climate Center, but the collaboration and in-depth work is ongoing. So we're looking forward to sharing that at the next meeting.
Okay. Any questions on that? It's pretty
An
straightforward.
observation that if we get some good nuggets, that really might tie in with some of the committees that Matt was describing in terms of energy planning and so on. So hopefully there'll be hopefully we'll have something that we can bring to the table in terms of discussions.
Good. Okay. Lisa, can you move that? You, all right.
Yes.
Why am I thinking we have a June meeting? We'll need to have a June meeting if this thing gets through council. Okay. Thank you. Misremember that. Okay, so that's referred then to the September meeting. Okay, all those in favor? All right, contrary, that's carried. Madam Clerk, anything else? Okay, so just if the matter passes council on next Thursday, then we really should do a special meeting, given that we're being asked for input. We'll have a special meeting on that 30-page-ish, 20 pages, 38-page-ish, building energy reduction strategy. Thank you.
Peter Sicker.
Or perhaps even earlier than June. Noting the first week of June is shot due to the fourplex zoning hearing that's gonna take up all of council for an entire week, possibly, maybe. Okay. Yeah, and then that will feed back into the machine, whatever our impact or our input is. Good, thank you, Matt. Okay. All right, so motion to adjourn from Matt then? There's nothing else? All right, so all those in favor? Thank you, and we're adjourned.